I'm introducing Patricia Gibney, who we're all terribly proud of for her phenomenal success with her series of books. So I will kick off. I'm Miriam. I'm the Arts Officer in County Westmeath, and Westmeath Libraries are hosting this chat. So to begin, thanks so much, Patricia, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you in the space where you create the magic? Is that your work?
This is the space where I do a lot of my editing. I do a lot of my actual first draft writing in bed in the mornings. So, but this would be kind of more the structured, when I get into the structured part of the writing.
Okay, so I suppose when it's becoming more, I don't want to say chore-like, but there are things you have to do. It's not sort of the free kind of flow of writing.
Yeah. Exactly. You use the different part. I do say I'm using a different part of my brain, so I kind of have to relocate to a different space to do it.
So you're a morning writer then. Some people are very much a particular type of the day suits them. You're obviously the morning suits you. Does it for?
Yeah, I read at night before I go to sleep, and when I get up in the morning, sometimes I might read a little bit, but I'd say by 9:30 I have the laptop on my knee and I write. I suppose the most I would write would be maybe 4.5 hours, because I find my eyesight isn't great like with the laptop. So after that, it's gobbledygook. So I would say maybe about 4.5 hours every day I do a bit of writing.
So still, that's a session.
It's a session, yes.
I remember speaking to you some time ago, now not 12 years ago, which you referred to earlier, when everything commenced and this process started, but I remember speaking to you around the time your first book had come out and your second book was soon to come out, and you were between your first and second deadline. And I remember being struck by, it's like the second album, you know, with music kind of syndrome that people talk about, like you have a lifetime to write your first book, and however long it takes to get there, and then suddenly you have a publishing deal and it's like, well, we'd like this now on October 22nd, and we'll be publishing it in November. That was your first book experience. Compared to now where you're at 9 books on, how does that look as an experience, going from writing, deadline, creation, you know, publishing?
Yeah. I suppose when I was doing my first book, excuse me, I had no deadline. I was writing, it was like, I initially started as a form of therapy, and then I set myself small goals and where I wanted to be with the book. So when I was writing The Missing Ones, it took about 5 years to write, but that was because I had no deadline. There was no one to push me. I could be still writing it, you know, whereas now, well, up until last year, I was writing 2 books a year, and the creative process isn't much different, only that the deadlines are tighter. So I was writing 2 books a year. I found that very tough going, because like to write, you have to think. So I wasn't getting much thinking time. You were like finishing one and running straight into the next. So in my last contract, I got it pushed out to doing 1 book a year. But still, then lockdown happened and COVID, and there was a while there I couldn't write at all. My creativity was gone out the window, and I just found it really, really difficult to write. But what I did then was I brought my deadline forward, to, I suppose, like, force myself to, you know, to sit down and write, and that actually worked. So I'm nearly back onto 2 books a year again since lockdown, because of, you know, there's nothing else to do. I can't travel. I can't do anything else. So like, what else would I be doing, only writing? But I find now that I have to work to a deadline, because I'd never finish it. So that's kind of the difference in the process now.
I guess, but the deadline can work in different ways, I guess, for different people. Some people really thrive on the energy of a deadline and looking down the barrel of the gun, and it can work for and against you. And I'm curious about that. I mean, I would be similar, a deadline, and I get it done, but it will be the whites of my eyes showing, and I won't have slept for 2 days. Do you know what I mean? Are you like that?
Yeah.
The flow is easier because you simply have to do it. There's no way around it.
Yeah, but the thing is, I have in the back of my mind as well, like, I work with a really good editor, and I always know that I can get an extension. So there's that little bit of leeway. You know, there's that, you know, I can stretch it out a little bit if I need to. But if I did feel like, you know, I had the block, or I couldn't, you know, it just wasn't working for me, like, I just talk to my editor and we can push out the deadline. But so far, like, I think I've only had one extension by a week or something like that. So me personally, that's the way I work at the moment. That could change, and I know that isn't for everybody.
It's interesting.
It's
interesting.
Yeah.
Because that strikes me as probably the difference between your relationships with your editors and your publishers now and how it would have been between, say, books 1, 2, and 3, and maybe even 4. Like you decided that you wanted to only produce 1 book a year, that was what was in you.
Yes.
But then it's funny, you picked up the stick again to beat yourself because you were going, I need to write, because what else?
Yeah. I think it's like we're in a different type, we're in a different type of world now. And like one of the reasons was, like, I wanted to travel. I wanted to be able to go different places, and been doing the 2 books a year, and like with the editing process built into it, it's like it's nonstop. And I just felt I was burning out a bit. So I said, like, I wanted to travel, I wanted to do all these things. But that's why I got the 1 book a year contract, and like book tour were brilliant. Like they said, whatever works for you. And I just felt like if I was traveling, that I had to get new inspiration, and it would just, it would help me. But then everything changed, so I had to adapt to that as well. So who's to say next year things might be different, hopefully.
Yeah, and you said it was hard to write at the beginning of at first, I guess, in COVID. Do you think that's because even if you don't know, you're picking up cues from it, no experience with meeting people, you can't engage with nature as much as you'd like, obviously in Westmeath, or if you're living in a rural location, that's okay. But was that part of, do you think, why?
Yeah. I found the 2 kilometer, like I know we're on 5 kilometer limit now, but the 2 kilometers at the beginning, I just found that so confining. Like it was just like weighing down on me. Like I could hardly go past the bottom of the road, and you had to turn back. And I love to walk. I couldn't even walk as far as the graveyard. I just found it so debilitating. And I know there was so much else going on in the world that was an awful lot worse. But on me personally, I found that such a confinement, and my brain as well as personally, plus, as you say, meeting people, interacting with people. I found I couldn't write dialogue, because subconsciously it was from listening to people and engaging with conversations that I was able to write dialogue. Not that I was transcribing what I'd heard, but it was getting that muscle in the brain going. And I just found that, like, you were just in your own 4 walls and talking to just family. And I just found I can't write, whereas other people found their creativity in lockdown. And I know I've talked to other writers, like initially a lot of and even with this 3rd lockdown, a lot of us find it so difficult to get that creative juice flowing.
Yeah, it's interesting and probably frightening at times as well. Like if there's a sort of a pause or a stop, and you're going, "What is this? And when will I be able?" There's a story about you keep turning up at the typewriter, so to speak, or keep turning up at your laptop and open it and sit in front of it. And Tom Waits talked about doing that and waiting for a song, to try and produce a song. And then he got really cross because he'd been at his computer every day at the right time, waiting, trying to sort of feel the energy of a song. And then he's driving down a road in LA or somewhere, and a fully formed song comes to him, and he's going, "This doesn't work for me now," So it's kind of, those stuck points are normal, but frightening as well.
Yeah, it just took time to adapt. And I think we, as human beings, we've learned, particularly in the last 12 months, how to adapt to unusual situations. And it just took time to adapt. And then when I kind of got over the fear of it, I wrote a few short stories and, wrote a few bits of rubbishy things. And at least I was, as you say, sitting down every day and I was writing something, probably all deleted, but it just got me into it again. I think a lot of it was fear as well. Like, it was a very terrifying time, especially like this time last year. And I think once, like after a few months, we got over that and said, like, this is what we have to live with for now, and accept it. Where, I accepted where I was. I was able to turn out a few more words then.
You say short stories. How did you find writing in short story form? Do you think it's something you'd be interested in pursuing, or it's more kind of a filler in of time to keep you writing?
I think for me, it was really just a filler. I mean, I did, before I was published, I did short stories and entered competitions and that, and it is a different format. I actually think writing a short story is more difficult for me anyhow than writing 115,000 word novel, and to write something in 1,500 words. I find that now much more difficult, and I actually have to do one for an anthology, so I better get the skates on. But I would prefer to be, at the moment, I prefer to be writing the novels, and it's much more freedom and much more, space to let your characters develop and let your story develop. Whereas the short story is a different type of discipline, and I don't think I'm disciplined enough to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. The process you talk about is very much the process of the last year, as opposed to the process of, say, your previous 6 or 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Something now you do that you never thought you'd do when you approach your writing that has actually worked for you, and you've gone, gosh, I wouldn't have ever done that had it not been for lockdown or COVID or not being able to see people or not being able to travel. Like if you're recceing a location, how do you do that now if you're writing about it?
Well, most of my location in my books is home-based, even though it's fictionalized. And the fact that I can walk a bit further now than I could this time last year helps. I do find like a lot of the lakes and the locations around the lakes feature in my books, and I find that the nearest lake to me now is 6 kilometers. I'm just using experience. Whereas before I just get in the car and I'd drive somewhere, or I'd drive around a location or a building. So now I'm dependent on memory and experience. But I find now we can do it with 5 kilometers. I can walk around the town because, as you know, Ragmullin is very loosely based on Mullingar, where I live.
Very loosely.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny, and I want to come to that in a minute. But in terms of, I suppose, what your readers and some have asked me about this, Lottie Parker is someone people are really invested in, and also want to know more about where is she going next. Will she find happiness? Where is your relationship with her? Those sort of questions have been sent through to me to inquire about. So what are you prepared to say about Lottie, her current environment, and so forth,
Well, I can't give away any spoilers because I know some people are back in book 1 and book 2. But Lottie is, I've found, like, from feedback that I've got, which is like a whole new thing to me in the last few years since I've become published, because I just can't believe that people are actually reading my books. And the feedback I get back on Lottie is that she's very relatable, that people see her as a very real character, a real person even, not even a character. And that kind of astounded me in the beginning because, like, writing, this was all new to me. So I didn't know what to expect. I didn't really know much about creating a character. But in the beginning, I had poured a lot of emotion that I was going through at the time where I created Lottie. And I think that's what made her very real to people. Plus, she's a very broken person and very flawed. And we all know people who, have come through trauma. Some people can cope with it, other people can't. And you go through all these various stages. And I suppose in a way, I probably went through a lot of emotional stages, which I could feed into Lottie. And plus, like, Lottie is a widow and I'm a widow, so a single mother raising 3 teenagers. So I could make that as real as I could, as far as I could go with it, and then fictionalize it. I love writing Lottie. I love seeing how far I can push her as a character. And when I sit down to write a book, like I'm writing book 10 at the moment, and when I start that, like, I have no idea where she's going next.
Really?
No, I don't know what's going to happen. I just know that I have to throw conflict at her. I have to make everything challenging around her, because that makes her interesting. Yeah, because if everything just ran smooth, I just think she would just get boring. Yeah. So I think if I can keep the readers guessing what's going to happen or next, I think that's, one challenge that I can accomplish. But she's, I like her as a character, and I know some people say, like, they'd love to get her and shake the living daylights out of her and tell her, can you not see what's right in front of your eyes, kind of thing. And another time you'd want to just get her and hug her and, have her as your best friend. And I think we all know a Lottie in our lives. There's that type of person who's can test our limits. So I'm delighted that she's, people like her or don't like her, but that she's an engaging character. and people want to know, where is she going next,
And I think, as you say, because there's parts of you that you're able to give expression to through her, that's what makes her a really robust character and really kind of resonates with people, I guess. Someone who's a big fan and whose 14-year-old has started reading your books now, and she's really envious of the fact that they have 9 ahead of them. But
right.
she said that she gets how you can create and work with a character like Lottie, but it's the perpetrators, the evildoers, the purely dark, sinister characters you create. Like, how do you conjure that? Because one hopes you don't know them in your life. So
but I think we all have kind of this curiosity kind of thing in our brains, that we're always curious about the dark side. And I think there's only a certain amount that you can use your imagination. Like, I mean, I'm not a serial killer, I'm not a murderer, not yet anyhow. And so I don't know mentally what it is like. So I will make up as much as I can. But I do watch a lot of true crime dramas and documentaries. And in the last year or two, there's a lot on Netflix where I can't remember the guy's name, but he interviews serial killers in prison. Is it Piers Morgan?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's another one done, an American one as well. So I find that fascinating, and being able to see how their background in most cases have actually formed this person into a killer. So a lot of my books are kind of around, the secrets that are buried in the past, abuses that occurred in the past, things that formed this dark side of the brain in my character. So I find that very, very interesting. And I think the more you read and the more that you watch about in the true crime area, that it can help inform your character. Sure. Like, I'm not basing any of my dark guys or dark women on real people, but each little facet or different facets of these people can inform the character.
Yeah, for sure. I could see how that would work. And I wonder, like, if you're researching, let's say, a type of killer, that has a particular makeup or a particular DNA in the way they operate, probably going to film and TV drama is a better research tool than trying to read about it, because you're getting a visual, you're getting imagery for a type of character you're not going to meet walking down, walking down any particular street in a rural town. So I imagine the audio-visual is a better tool perhaps for that.
It's just one of the tools, I find it works for me, and I think we're living in a television age as well. I mean, I'm an avid reader. I'm always reading. I could have 2 or 3 books on the go, but I love reading fiction. But I find if I can watch the true crime dramas and documentaries rather than take up a true crime book.
Yes.
So for me personally, I find that works. Sometimes I'll just even take notes while I'm watching the TV. So I can do both that way. But my reading choice would mainly be fiction.
Yeah, mine too. It's interesting, actually. I would use it almost sometimes as a way to as a travel guide. So if I was going somewhere that culturally I didn't understand, I'd find strong fiction about that area. I'm not sure. I think we'll have more visitors to Mullingar because of your series. I want to talk a little bit about the mischief in your books. There's definitely mischief, and we can, people who know you and people who've worked with you in the past and people who know Mullingar and know the inner workings of various different kind of corporate environments could certainly point to, characters that have, entered your books, like the planner who passed away, and there's the various different, who's killed. There's got to be mischief when you're creating that and you're going, can I do this? Is that okay? I mean, is there at some point an ethical kind of dilemma when you're thinking, what do I do with that character?
I don't think there's any of my characters. There's none of my characters actually based on anybody real, bar what I've kind of poured into Lottie in her emotional mental state. But like, I would be what would you say? I'd retain snippets from people that we've met over the years, I remember meeting a man one time, and he was taking out a form out of his pocket, and he opened his inside of his jacket, and it was like a filing cabinet in his inside pocket. And like, I mean, and I thought that was just fascinating, and he knew where everything was. He was able to take out the right form and whatever in his pocket. So I kind of built that into the character of Kirby. So I would use snippets of things that I've come across over the years, but my 99.9% of my characters are I make them up, and they would be informed by little pieces of things that I've come across over the years.
Probably, yeah, a bit of a jigsaw then, really, you know.
Yeah. And as I'm writing, they just come, you know what I mean? And I don't think I've written anything that anybody could say, oh, I know who that person is. You know, there would be, I like idiosyncrasies, is that the word? Idiosyncrasies of people. And I love feeding them into characters, you know, in some obscure way.
Yes. And you mentioned earlier, Patricia, that you get great feedback and you have an editor that you work really well with. I'm curious about that. Again, recently I had a conversation with someone who's kind of starting out on their writing journey, and they told me they can't cope with criticism at all. And I was immediately alarmed, going, oh dear, you know, you have to see it as critique, and you have to see it as, it's not personal, it's about the piece of work, it's not about you. And that's a very hard thing to explain to someone, isn't it? And it's a hard thing to get your own head around, I'm sure.
It's one of the hardest things that I've come across since I started this journey, because like when I wrote every time I write my first draft, I write for myself, and I write with the idea that nobody is ever going to read it. But then I go through my editing process, and then it becomes something that you have to hand over. I found it very hard to deal initially with critiques and criticism. And I'll be honest about that. I was like, you know, I've nurtured this project, and I have brought it to life, and I have let it go. And then, you know, people don't like it, or some people don't like it, or whatever. And I just found that so hard. But now I realize, like, you know, you grow up a lot in the process. And I realize, like, you know, my books aren't for everyone. There's people who will see things that they like, see things they don't like, and I have to accept that. So once I have it finished and it's handed over and it's going to publication, I have to take a step back and say, it's no longer mine. You know, it's out there. It's in the public's hands now. And I have to learn that any criticism is not personal, because initially I was thinking it was like a personal assault on me, but it's not. It's on a piece of work that I've put out there. So, you know, it is a learning process, because you have to go through all these kind of hurdles and obstacles along the way. And people say, like, you have to grow thick skin in this business. That's easier said than done, you know, because you as a person are the same person. So you have to kind of learn how to deal with things. So how I have learned is that once it's finished and I've done my final proofread and it's no longer my little baby, it's out there. So I have to kind of walk away, move on to the next project. Yes. So that's how I deal with it. But it's particularly difficult, and it is particularly difficult for people starting out.
I think so, yeah. And I think that period, even before you've done your final draft and you and your editors, everyone's happy, you know, that's involved in the process of getting the book on shelves. I imagine there's a process between you handing it over to your editor as well that's challenging, because some part that you really liked or you poured yourself, you know, late one night in tears, and they're going, yeah, no, that has to go. That just doesn't work with the book. That's probably a different type of critique. But I would say that's very difficult, and you have to sort of go with it to some degree.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can go into dialogue and discussion with your editor if the editor wants something taken out or something put in, and if I'm not kind of, you know, happy about it, like, we'll just get on the phone and have a chat about it. Normally, I come around to her way of thinking, but as Stephen King said, sometimes you have to kill your little darlings. So there might be a character that I really liked, as you say, cried over or something, and I have to take it out. So sometimes I have to say, well, it's going to make the story better, you know, and I have to recognize that my editor is professional, and she knows what makes a story work. And sometimes as a writer, I can get too close to it. So that's why it's good to have, you know, a second pair of eyes look over it. But I'm not as precious about my words and my books now, or my drafts that I sent to my editor, as I would have been 2 or 3 years ago, because I know she knows what she's talking about. She's, a professional editor, and I can make my case if something, if there's something I want to retain or something I want to let go, and have a discussion about it, and then we come to an agreement.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I mean, I can see it. It's almost like a negotiation, but in a trying to keep the emotion out of it a little bit, I suppose.
Yes, yeah. But as I said, it's all a learning process. Like with every book I write, every paragraph I write, I'm learning something new.
Yeah.
Even still, yeah.
I mean, the amount you've written in a relatively short space of time is phenomenal. So that's why I'm so curious about your process. I wondered, was there anything you've bought, actually? And by bought, I mean anything you've bought that you've gone, God, thank God I did that, because it's helped me so much. And I'm thinking of, it might be a piece of software, it might be a comfortable chair, a holiday you went on. Is there one thing that you got, you think, how could you write without that? There's obvious things like laptops.
Yeah. Well, I got, as you say, it's a piece of software that I use to write. It's called Scrivener. Now, I know it's not for everybody, because I know some writers hate it, but I absolutely love it, because I write all over the place. Like something might come to me that I know is not fitting in the part of the story I'm in now. So I want to write it. I want to get it down. I don't want to lose it. I want to be able to see where it is. And on Scrivener, it is a package for, like, you can get one for script writing, for novel writing, whatever. So I can see visually on the screen all my chapters. Now, some people are very organized and they call them like chapter 1, 2, or 3, but I have a little piece. My heading is like what happens in this section that I'm writing. And you can, like, click and drag it, and you can move pieces around. And I do all my first drafts now on Scrivener, and I don't think I'd be able to write without it. I just find it great. And it's a cheap package, it's not expensive.
Did you have that for your first book?
No, I only got it, I think I was on the 3rd book before. It was a friend of mine in Dublin, Neve, said to me, how can you not write without Scrivener? So I got a trial run on it, and it took a while to get used to it, because it's different from Word. But when you're finished, then you can compile it and you bring it into Word. So I do all my edits in Word.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just find that a good package for me. But I say it's not for everyone. So
I think you have to find something that is for you when you're starting to write with volume, if you like, when you're starting to work. I'm curious as well. You said that you start writing, and it's almost that you trust the writing, things will form as you're in the process, as opposed to other writers who have a very kind of clear structure, or at least an outline of a structure. Do you have that as well, kind of, sort of, or are you very much character-led or plot? Which comes first, or it's a mash of both, a mishmash of both?
It's a mishmash of everything. I'm not really a planner or a plotter. Like when I start a book, I have an idea of a theme, maybe. I have an idea for the type of murder that's going to occur in the book. Sometimes I know exactly where I'm going with it, but rarely do I. It's when I create the characters, create the scenario and the crime scene, then things flow out of it. I'm usually halfway through the book before I actually start taking notes. And the way I work is I create the character, and that character becomes real to me. So that person is either a victim, a perpetrator, a red herring. So that person has to live somewhere, has people around them, has to be interviewed. So all that kind of, it flowers out of the character. So I would say my books are character driven until I get to a certain place, and then the plot, I can thread the plot back in through the book. So that's where Scrivener comes in handy, when I have to go back in and put stuff in. I find it an exciting way to write, because usually I never know where it's going to end up when I'm writing. And it's a bit of a job to actually tie it all up in the end and make sure I've tied up all the loose ends and that. But I find it exciting, and it keeps it very alive to me. I don't think I could, at the moment anyhow, things change and I'll change, that I could know exactly what's going to happen in every chapter. I can't work that way. So that's the way I work, is just as I go along. I'll write something, I say, oh yeah, and then that'll inform something that's going to happen later on.
Yeah, so there's an organicness to that, I suppose. It's interesting you say exciting, because some people talk about the exhaustion of the process, but you obviously you've got to with your own process that for now it's an exciting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I enjoy doing it, and yeah.
That's key. I wanted to maybe finish up, because you've given us lots of your time. Thank you very much. And say, do you maybe ask you a few just very quick lastminute.com questions type thing? What are you reading at the minute? What's tickling your reading juices at the moment? What are you enjoying?
Well, normally I read crime and thrillers. That would be my go-to reading. But I found in this lockdown, everything, that's normal has gone out the window. So I've read 2 books by Christian Hannah, The Nightingale and The Four Winds. I've just finished, which I thought were excellent. Four Winds I'd recommend. It's about 1930s, the Depression in America, and just one family's experience in it. And the writing is brilliant. I loved, and I'd highly recommend it, is Leonard and Hungry Paul by Ronan Hession. I think it's one of those, the Dublin picks books, the library picks at the moment. I found that really good. And Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, I thought that was excellent. But I love, having a crime series on the go, and yeah, and I love coming, finding a new writer, and it's like they've just launched book 5, and I get so excited because I go right back to the first book and start before I even get to book 5.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell me, are you a hard copy or a Kindle reader?
I do both. I love Kindle for travel, and I read at night in bed, so it's really handy. But I always have a book on the go on Kindle, and I'd have a paperback or a hardback as well. I get sent a lot of proofs to read, which will all be paperback. So I've just read Joe Spain's new one is coming out in May, and it's excellent. So I'd recommend that when it comes out. The Perfect Lie. I love reading Liz Nugent's books in paperback. There's sometimes I know something about the book that she just. I love her characters, and you can form more of an attachment to a book when it's a paperback, whereas the Kindle is a little bit impersonal. So I read all Liz Nugent's on paperback. Sorry?
So you can't curl up on the sofa in front of the fire with a good Kindle. It has to be.
No.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that's great. I mean, there's the makings of a book club there, really, isn't there? Certainly, library. So Westmeath Libraries and Westmeath Arts, we thank you very much for your time. I think I got most of your readers' questions in. I did have a few. And best of luck with the next book, which is out when, and what can you tell us?
Well, Silent Voice, Broken Souls book 7 just came out in paperback, and Silent Voices, which is book 9, has just come out as an ebook. And I'm currently writing book 10, and it should be out by the end of the year.
And I'm curious, and if I'm allowed to ask, and you probably can't answer, there was a wound of sorts in the title, whether it's betrayal or broken. Is there a wound in the title of the next book, or you're not there yet?
It's book 10. I never put a title. I've learned the hard way not to put a title on my book, because my publishers normally come up with the title. So I used to spend, I used to waste so much brain power trying to think of a title. So now it's just book 10. And they'll say, do you like this title when they come up with it? And I say, that's brilliant. That'll do. That's grand. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, we look forward to the next book, Patricia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a million.
Bye. Slán.